just share my screen and then I'll start. And to Munna and to Pooja, because I won't be able to see the messages on the chat. So if anyone has, typed any message, just let me know. You can interrupt me in between and you can let me know about the message. Is it cool?
Yes, I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Tanvi. I am a master's student at Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi, and I'll be presenting regarding these topics today. So, because when I was preparing the presentation, I thought that these are lot many topics, so I try to wrap them up in best way possible. So how we'll be going about this is that I'll do one topic at a time, and after every topic I'll give you guys couple of minutes to maybe ask questions regarding that topic before we proceed to the next one, and we'll try to see how many topics that we are able to complete today. uh, is it good? Is it good enough for everyone?
Everyone is sending a thumbs up. I don't know if you can see that.
No, I cannot see that.
Yeah,
Thank
people
you.
are cool with it.
Yeah, okay. So, how the way I have designed this presentation is through my own experience of having to study stats in psychology at undergrad level, in the sense that, my experience with having to learn psychology in college was that professors like used to, just say that this is like a formula, this is the statistical formula, and this is a data set. Now you have to like find the answer to that, but rarely have I seen professors making us understand that why certain formula is being applied or what is the sense behind using a certain concept for a certain set of data. So I'll be trying to provide answers for the why in that case. So if I'm not making sense, just let me know. I'll try to explain it in a different way. All right. So let's begin. I'll start with explaining the difference between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. Okay. So, in a simple term, oh, by the way, whatever it's written on the slides, it's taken from some books. But the way I'll be explaining it will be how I understand these concepts. So, I'll try to be as simple as possible in that regard. So, descriptive statistics is when we are talking about how to summarize certain quantity or certain attribute for a group of people that you're currently studying in your research. Whereas in inferential statistics is when we are making inferences or when we are making predictions or estimating those attributes to a larger population. So this is like a very basic one-liner difference between the two. In order to explain that, what happens is usually in research, what we tend to do is we tend to have a certain number of people that will be applying certain psychological tools among them, or will be collecting data from, because it's practically impossible to collect data from each and every individual. So this is where your descriptive statistics comes into picture, that how you're describing your sample, how you're like calculating what attributes or what raw data will be collected from the sample. So in that case, you tend to use mean, sample mean, you tend to use median mode, standard deviation. So you define your sample for the research. Whereas when we have to make inferences about the population, as in that what we are trying to predict out of this research for a whole population, how we are trying to generalize certain relationships or certain psychological attributes to a larger section of the population, that's where we use inferential statistics. Uh, so, if I have to describe it in my own words, describing the research sample to make inferences about the population you want to understand. So, describing your sample comes your descriptive stats, and making inferences about the population is where your inferential stats. So, this is like my basic difference between the two. Is it clear to everyone, or any questions so far? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. Any questions? Do we have any questions?
Nothing in the chat so far. Devanshi, please, you can unmute and speak.
Tanvi ma'am, can you please give an example of inferential statistics? Like we have mean, median, mode of descriptive statistics, and so
Mhm.
what would be the examples of inferential statistics?
Okay, first of all, don't call me ma'am, just Tanvi. That's the one first basic rule of interacting with me. Is it clear?
Okay.
Yeah. So inferential statistics will be used when you are devising like an hypothesis. So in a research, when you're conducting a research, for example, you want to understand how stress impacts academic performance of college going students. So this is so college going students becomes your population. In your population you also have people going to central government universities, you have people going to state universities, you have people going to private universities, so it's a huge population, right? But for your research purposes you'll probably going to send your questionnaires to your college people, right? Because that's the easily accessible sample that you have. So in that case, what you gather from the questionnaire is you gather a raw data, you convert it to a standard data, and then you calculate mean, median, mode, and standard deviation. Those that's how you describe your sample for that. But when you are trying to estimate that what how the stress impacts college going students, which is a larger population, wherein you say that increasing stress, when the stress increases the students performance becomes, it decreases, so the performance level decreases. In that sense you draw hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, and then you make a general then you also like test the significance value, and then you make an like conclusion that how the stress impacts a student's academic performance. So from devising your hypothesis to testing and then measuring the significance value, that becomes part of your inferential stats. In between, like even Pooja and Munna or Nikita, maybe if you want to add on, you can like do that. But did I make sense? Yes or no, Divanshi? If I was able to answer the question, then we can proceed.
Yes, yes, I understood it. So we can say that we include descriptive statistics in between the process of inferential stats.
Kind of, yeah. You can say that. So what we can do is we'll hold on to your question. I'll proceed further, and by the time I discuss the question, like the research paper that was shared on the group, maybe then I can be able to give a very solid answer to your question. Is it okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So yeah, the next topic is about scales of measurement. Just give me a second. Yeah, so the next topics are about scales of measurement. In certain books, it's called levels of measurement. Some books call it scales of measurement, and so on. But four primary scales would be nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio scales. So let's begin by what the textbooks say about nominal scale. Okay. Is the screen okay with everyone? Is the screen visible?
The screen is visible, but it's not on slideshow.
Uh, Now is it? Because it's there from my end.
No, we just still see the normal window. It's not slideshow. I think you have to share your entire screen before.
So even for before doing that, was it also like this also?
Yeah, we just saw your first slide and we couldn't really see the other slides. Were you actually changing the slides?
Yeah, I was changing.
I'm so
So
sorry. I thought you were just keeping it that way.
yeah,
Just
it just give me. I'll do that again. Now can you see it?
we see the nominal scale slide.
Is it on slideshow now?
Yeah, yeah, now it is.
Okay. So what the textbooks say about the nominal scale is that the variable with values that are in categories. So what you're doing is, for example, you want to understand how a certain attributes differ in context of genders. or you want to understand how a attribute varies in context of demographics like urban rural population or low income middle income high income population, that is your nominal scale. So when you are in the research papers, when the column says the male participants were this many, female participants were this many, or non-binaries were this many, so that's where you're just basically categorizing your population, rather I would say sample for your research. So that's the basic nominal scale. uh, so it's like a very basic, and it's just used for making categories out of your sample. Moving on to two most important scales that we use are like ordinal and interval scale. And often at times people, even for me, I have been confused between how the difference between the two goes. Right. So in ordinal scale, entities or data are ranked with respect to the degree to which particular attribute is possessed by them. So if you're measuring certain attribute, is it more or is it less compared to the other person? That's just the basic comparison that you can do. With interval scale, what happens is that these separation have like a very constant separation. The values between the two attributes have a very constant separation between the two. So the distance or separation remains constant between any two consecutive intervals, ranks, entities, or data points. I know it won't be like, I won't be making sense right now. So what I'll do is I'll explain with examples, and let me know if you can follow through by that. All right. So, for example, there's a test of maximum points 100, right? And you have 10 students or 10 people as your sample, and these are the ranks of these 10 people. So, A's achieved first rank, B achieved second rank, C achieved 25th rank, and so on and so forth. Uh, is the basic example clear? Because then I'll proceed. Is it visible? Is it clear what I'm trying to convey through example?
It is visible and clear to me.
Okay. Now this is the part where I want the responses, and Pooja, please help me out if people are responding on chat. Okay.
Yes.
So my first question is, based on this data, based on this basic information about these 10 people, what can you conclude from this? Okay. Uh, Can you tell me who scored the highest points? Do we have answers on the
A
chat?
and B.
Ma'am, A has the highest points.
Okay. Who scored the lowest?
The I has scored the lowest.
Okay, because that person had, so it's E, because that's the 90th rank. Is it making sense? Just
Um,
this part.
There are people replying with E on chat as well.
Okay, okay. The third question is, can you arrange them in a sequence? Can you arrange them in higher to, like, from increasing to decreasing or decreasing to increasing order? Can you do that? Yes, no, maybe.
People are replying
yes.
yes.
Okay. Did C score more points than F? So here C has 25th rank and F has 50th rank. So did C score more points than F?
Yes.
Okay. The last question is, did C score twice the more points than F? C has 25th rank and F has 50th rank. Did C score twice the more points than F? Can you make out of this data? Yes, no, maybe.
I don't think so.
Okay. So basically what I did here was to give an idea of how an ordinal scale is, that you can make out who has the highest value, who has the lowest value. You can probably arrange from low to high or high to low, but you cannot make how what is the exact value scored by the individual. That's your ordinal scale. Was I able to explain ordinal scale here? Just the basic of it.
Yes.
Okay. Because I'll be changing the question screen for the next. It's a similar example, but I'll be changing for interval scale. Is it making sense?
I see people nodding their head.
Okay. I'm completely blind over here. Thank you, Pooja, for sharing that with me. Okay, moving on to the next example. Now, over here, again, the same test with maximum points 100, but this time instead of ranks, I have given them points. So A has 98 points, B has 91 points, and like D, E, F, they have individually scored points. From this data, who scored the highest points?
A,
Okay. Who scored the lowest points?
E,
Can you arrange them in a sequence?
yes,
Okay. Did C score more points than F?
yes,
Did C score twice the more points than F?
Yes.
More than twice more points than F?
no, no, no,
No.
No, actually, no.
Yeah. Did C score twice the more points than F? D. This time it's D.
yes,
Yes.
So this is what your interval scale is. Because each points has a very you can make out of it with what value is it. So there's like an equal distance between point 1 and point 2 and point 3. So that's what your interval scale is. That's because 2 points have equal distance or separation between them. Is the interval scale and ordinal scale understandable at this point? I'll just stop sharing my screen so that I can see you all.
Yes, Anuga, please.
Yeah, so again, I'm going to ask about an example.
Mm-hmm.
What would be a psychological variable that can be measured through interval scale?
Okay, because that's a very interesting, and this is what the next topic was about. Like this
Okay,
next section of this topic is about.
okay.
I'm holding on to your question. Meanwhile, if anyone else has any question, yeah, Devanshi.
Tanvi, in the previous example, you said that about the equal intervals, like equal intervals. That means equal distance between the points, right?
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
But how can you show that how there was an equal distance, like where it was?
Okay, so the distance was in the sense that it's, for example, you are giving a class test, right? The class test is of maximum 100 marks, right? And you scored, for example, 95 marks. Right. So your score between 90 to 95 and 95 to 100, is it equal in, can you measure it equally? Can you measure each and single mark individually? Because the distance with the subtraction between the two units is same. So if you subtract 95 and 90, it's 5, and then you subtract 195, it's again 5. It's just simple. I'm trying to make it as simple as it possible. So like if I'm not able to do so, please kind of excuse me on that. I'll try changing a different bit of it. Is it making sense till now, Devanshi? Was I able to
Yes,
answer?
yes, yes. I
Okay.
understood it from this example. I was asking
Hmm.
like in the previous example that you showed that they had like equal subtraction points as you show like class
Okay.
test
I'll
example you
show the
gave.
screen again. I'll show the screen again, and then we can try again. Okay.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Which this example where I'm talking in terms of points, or the example where I'm talking in terms of rank?
In the points one.
Okay. So it's like it's like again like your class test. Like out of 100 marks, A
Hmm.
scored 98 marks, B
Hmm.
scored 91 marks. Right.
Hmm.
I'm saying that if you subtract 98 and 91, you get a subtraction out of it.
Yeah. Of seven, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
And if, for example, hypothetically, there is a student who scored just 1 mark out of 100, and the other scored, let's say, 8, is the subtraction still the same? Are you getting like the difference between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4? It's a uniform, like it's like your scale that you use, the ruler, if you say so.
Yes,
Mm,
yes, okay. But I was asking like the difference between like 91 and 68 is not
no,
such.
no, no, not. It's just the simple. There are 10 students, 10 friends of yours who scored these marks. That's it.
Okay.
Because I was actually trying to compare it in the sense that when you say someone had scored 25th rank and 50th rank, there's no equal. You cannot say that the person who scored 25th rank has also scored twice many marks as compared to person F.
Yes, yes.
Uh, was it clear now?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay.
Okay. Moving on to ratio scale. So I'm just keeping it as it is. I'm not putting it on slideshow for now. It's again very sophisticated, like it's the like highest level of scale, if you say so, because it involves all the characteristics of the previous scale. That is, that the values are again equidistant. Additionally, you also have a zero magnitude, which says that your variable or the attribute is completely absent. That's the ratio scale. I'm giving a gist of it, like the basic idea, then we'll move on to how we can explain these scales in terms of psychological attributes. So far, is it the basic idea is clear? Is it clear for everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on, I'll again present my screen. Okay. Is it on slideshow?
Yes.
Uh, okay. For that question you asked, what I'll do is probably make you understand central tendency first and then move on to that, because that's how I planned it. There is a example for psychological attribute as well towards the after central tendency. So is it okay with you?
Sure, sure, sure. No problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah. So in central tendencies, what you do is it's all about having a typical or most representative value for a group of scores. For example, in the comic, you have a group of students who wants to play basketball, right? They have variable heights. So how can you represent your height to let's say judges, that what is the average height or what is the like the middle value of the height that the all the team members correspond to. So that's like a very representative value of group of scores. What you do with central tendency is that a single summary describes your entire distribution of observations. Again, the idea of descriptive statistics, that how you're describing your sample, how you're describing the group that you're studying. So you do that by using mean, median, and mode. It's very again textbook. I've copied it and pasted it from the textbook itself. With mean is that it's the average of the group. It's very like it's a very basic thing that how you average it. So it's like very textbook formula also given. So it's an ordinary average, like you total each scores and then you divide by the total number of people. That's your mean. When to use mean? So when you have variables which are equal, having equal intervals, like your interval scale. That's the very that's where you're probably going to use a mean, and it's very commonly used in psychological research in the sense that almost every paper that I have like studied, most of them use mean. I've hardly seen with me median and mode. Probably there are out there, but the interest that I have, most of them involves mean as central value. uh, Moving on to median. So median is your again middle score. When you arrange your distribution from highest to lowest or lowest to highest, what is the middle value of that group? That's your median. When we can use median is when you want to uh, rank order, like your ordinal scale. That's where probably the median is used when you're arranging ranks from highest to lowest and lowest to highest. So what is the middle point that is dividing your entire group? That's median. Mode is the value with has greatest frequency, like maximum repetition. So in the cases where you're trying to identify where you're trying to measure an attribute in context of genders. So which gender group has maximum frequency uh, of that attribute? That's where you're going to use mode. Till now, was I able to make sense? Because that's like a basic definitions that I picked it out from the textbook. Because now what I'll be going to do is I'll be involving scales of measurement and central values together. So far it's very textbook. I'm like kind of assuming people know mean, median, and mode. So was it okay? Shall I proceed? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. Just give me a second. Okay, again, certain questions. The meanness of psychology, right? For example, let's say we want to measure personality traits. Again, I'm talking about psychological attribute like extroversion and introversion. Hypothetically, there is a questionnaire which has like these two questions. So, like, there's hypothetically I've designed two questions which says I like to meet new people whenever I go outside. So, if you all can rate yourself out of this scale, you can say in the mic for the first question itself. I like to meet new people whenever I go outside. So if you are taking this kind of a test, how would you like to rate yourself? -3,
Uh,
-2, yeah.
Tanvi, I'm sorry for interrupting, but you are not sharing your slide, right?
Is okay. Just a second. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Now is it visible
Yes, thank you.
on the slideshow as well?
Yes.
Okay. So the question is, this is the again hypothetically I've picked out two questions like if you want to administer personality questionnaire which is measuring extroversion and introversion. So these are like very hypothetical two questions. So for the first question, how would you rate yourself along this scale? Are people responding on the chat? Pooja?
Yes, we see a lot of ones here.
Okay. For the second question, I enjoy a quiet time at home on weekends.
A solid +3.
Okay.
A lot of +3s.
Okay. So in for this question, how should we summarize such a sample? So what the number of people there on the call in the meeting itself, if for example, if you are supposed to study this raw data, people saying -1 or +3, how would you summarize? For example, we are your a sample from a larger population. So how would you summarize this raw score? Can you say the person, for example, if Pooja said that for the question like I like to meet new people whenever I go outside for -1, and for example, if I also say -1, can you say who is more in that regard? Like who disagrees more for that question? Because both of us said -1, but can you make who probably is more, who probably doesn't like to meet new people more? Can you make out of it?
Not really.
No.
Yeah. So again, this is how psychological attribute happens. Like, when you say the way I feel is hard to quantify, but how hard from 1 to 10? Because again, if you rate yourself, can you say that, okay, it's arranged from strongly disagree to strongly agree? But can you say that there's an equal gap between -3 and -2 and +2 and +3? And this is how most of the questionnaires or inventories or test batteries are in psychology. So this is this is like a very paradoxical situation that we are trying to measure something, but we do not have discrete information to measure or quantify data. And it's a very debatable and controversial topic in statistics itself. In this kind of a data, how are you going to measure mean? So what the textbooks, or what rather I was reading about yesterday, was that in psychology, what we do is that the raw data that is there on the chat, like -3 +3 or -1 +1, what we do is we make a raw data. So in a questionnaire, like all the questions that you make a raw data, you convert that raw data into a standard data. Again, that standard data is also on a spectrum. It's not discretely there, right? So somewhere your questionnaire is lying between an ordinal scale and an interval scale, because in psychology we do not have a zero value, right? You cannot say someone is zero in terms of extroversion or introversion, or you cannot say someone has zero intelligence, uh, right? So somewhere our psychological measures are a combination of ordinal and interval scale, because that's the best we can do. Every attribute, psychological attribute, is on a spectrum. There's no discrete difference between the 2 points, right? Because there's a lot of assumption involved to make it more of a ratio kind of a scale, but it's not, because ratio involves a zero value. That is, you have absence of intelligence, which is ironical in nature, right? Studying psychology. So to get an idea, this is how your psychological measures are. That it's like a combination of ordinal and an interval scale. So far, did I make sense? Was I able to answer your question, Anubha?
Yes.
Yes.
Basically, from what I've understood, psychological variables cannot have an absolute zero.
Yeah.
So all of those attributes are on a continuum. So it's hard to quantify that way.
Yeah. Okay. Was Anubha, because you summarize it like in a sentence, so was Anubha clear to everyone? Do we have doubts? Because it's, if you dive deep into the rabbit hole of statistics in behavioral sciences and psychology, that's a very underlying debate. I'm still confused on most of the things, that how we are doing things, how we are measuring things. So like, was I'm able to convey what I was trying to convey, that there is a paradox in the psychology, there is a meanness of psychology, that you can there's a lot of underlying assumptions involved in calculating stuff. Was it okay? Do I proceed? So despite all of this, despite these issues and concerns, why do we still see mean being used as the most popular choice for central tendency, right? With mean, what happens is, okay, the question is, with mean, unlike the other measures of central tendency, the mean is the responsive to the exact position of each score in the distribution, because you are measuring each, like, where in the distribution of the population your sample lies. That's why the mean is used. Because if you increase a value, like individually, the formula for, if I show again the formula for mean, right? Uh, yeah, what you're doing is you're making a summation of each individual scores, and you're dividing it by the total number of items. So you're adding each value to it. So if even if one value of this, like, of your sample changes, your mean tends to change. So which means for your entire distribution, the mean is giving you an exact location of where a individual lies on the distribution. All right. Again, when a measure of central tendency should reflect, so central tendency, if I again recap the definition of it, you're representing your sample, you're giving the trying to make a most accurate representation of your sample in context of the population, right? So that's why we tend to prefer mean. One of the most important characteristics of the mean is its stability from sample to sample. Suppose we draw a series of samples from a population of scores. Each sample is of the same size, and each is and if you select randomly from the available population of scores, because chance affects which scores get into sample. So again, if I have to simplify this entire paragraph, I'll go back to this slide. All right. So what you're doing is you're taking this population and you're drawing a sample out of sampling techniques. Like you randomly select 10 people out of 100 to study a certain psychological attribute. All right. So if assuming your population, if assuming out of the population, you're randomly selecting, like completely perfectly randomly selecting sample, that sample would be a representation of your entire population, the mean of the sample. Right. That's why we use tend to use me. So far, was I just simply fumbling, or did some of the things make sense? Yes, no, maybe. Any questions so far? Okay. Just a second. I'll just rearrange my slides and then I present again. So this is like entire paradox of how we tend to do central tendencies. And what happened with me in undergrad was that professor who was teaching me stats, she was like, this is the formula for mean, this is how you calculate, this is the example question, calculate the mean. Like, why I'm calculating the mean? Because there is no discrete value, so nobody gives you. For me, personal experience, I think it might vary for other people as well, but for me, nobody gave me an answer that why we are doing mean. Like, even if you're talking about scales, we don't have a ratio scale that where we can perfectly apply mean. But why are we using mean in a psychological attribute thing where everything is on spectrum and there's no discrete value of everything? So how are we doing that? So nobody like possibly gave me an answer for that. And I was trying to read or refresh this topic again yesterday for the presentation. Okay, so moving ahead, let's add some more drama to it. This is like a very basic bell-shaped curve for intelligent IQ scores, right? So if I ask you two questions, the first question being, is a person, so hypothetically, there's a person who has an IQ of 115 and a person who has an IQ of 89 points, right? Can you say the person with IQ of 115 is more intelligent than the person of IQ of 89? Yes, no, maybe.
Yes.
Okay. But can you say again? There are again two people, one of IQ 120 and other of IQ 60. Can you say person with IQ 120 is twice more intelligent than person of IQ 60?
No.
Okay, but when if you see IQ, I'm assuming that every one of us knows that when we say someone having high IQ, above average IQ, so there's like a certain range that the textbooks gave, that between this to this range, the intelligence of the person is severe, profound, average, above average, high, or gifted. So this is like a range. Over there, if you see, the range for severe and profound somewhere starts around 0. But again, we don't have, you cannot say someone is has absence of intelligence, right? So again, it's a very assumption based measurement that we are doing in psychology, that we are converting raw score to standard score, and then we are assigning, okay, from this to this range, the person has average value for a certain attribute. So your data in psychology is somewhere a combination of an ordinal scale and an interval scale, not ratio scale. But we are assuming the data to be a ratio scale. Am I making sense so far? Because after this, we'll be moving to variance and standard deviation. So did I make sense so far? So my idea was not just to say this, okay, this is textbook definition of mean, this is textbook definition of median, and this is what mode is from the textbook. My idea was to communicate that when we are going to see research papers in psychology, uh, you should be knowing, like every one of us should be knowing that at the end of the day, what we are trying to measure out of any research paper, specifically for psychology, that the values are not discrete, right? So, and so that again, as the statistics becomes more and more complex, we tend to kind of miss out on these small little details for psychology. So my idea was to, through this presentation, was to communicate that somewhere at the back of your head, this kind of a thing should be there. That ultimately there is no absence of any variable. There's no absence of intelligence in anyone. There's no absence of any personality. It's just on a spectrum that how we are measuring it. Was it making sense? Okay, so we'll just change the topic to variance and standard deviation from this onwards. I'll just share this presentation. Okay. So now, if you're talking about central tendencies, like a central tendency, whether it's mean, median, or mode, being the representative of your sample, right? So why are we going to measure variability in your sample? Why are we going to measure how deviated a certain score or attribute is from the central value? Why do we do that? Reason being that for a same given central tendency, like for example, mean in most of the cases, this like the graph on your right? So it's I'm taking a screenshot from a book. So for these two graphs, which is measuring mean on housing prices, right? The mean is same, but how your sample or the population is distributed across the central tendency of mean is variable, right? So if I have, like, let's say this is A and this is B, if I say that the mean of A sample is this and mean of also B sample is also same, but it is not giving me the idea of the distribution across the central variable. Again, for this, you have same mean but different kind of distribution, and that's why we tend to measure variability and deviation from the central value. That how your sample is being distributed across, let's say, mean for that matter. Okay. So that being said, variance is a measure of how spread out a set of scores are. In a very basic layman terms, how your data is being distributed for the sample or for the population at large. For standard deviation is, it's basically the square root of the average of the squared deviation. So what you're doing is you're calculating variance, which is like how spread out the scores are. You're calculating that, and you're making our square root of it. That's a standard deviation. These again, this is standard deviation is again a very popular choice for calculating variance or calculating the distribution of the sample, and it involves mean. Again, to measure these two popular things, you need to be making assumption of your psychological data uh, resembling a ratio scale, even though it's not, right? So it's a widely used standard deviation. If you are seeing mean on a research paper, chances are you're also going to see the value for standard deviation. So this is basically your variance. Now, if you square root SD ka square root loge, so that is your uh, standard deviation. It's very like uh, again, to be very simple, it's again, I'm repeating myself, I know that it's how your sample is distributed, and that's the basic idea of it. Because again, it depends on your if I go back to the beginning, like your scales of measurement and your central tendency is just the next step of it, that you're measuring how what is the difference between your sample. So far Did I make sense for everyone? I'll just stop here for the moment. Was the standard deviation part here? I know I kind of gave a very gist of it, but if you any of the reference books that you are using for stats or any of the resource material, you will be seeing formula for mean, median, mode, and standard deviation. You'll be seeing the formula everywhere. Somewhere, some good books also like suggest why we are using it. So that's like the whole my summary of what the textbook says. Okay, and the last topic for the presentation was about the significance and the p-value, right? So that topic is essentially a major part of your inferential statistics. That when you are measuring an attribute for a sample, and for example, if you want to replicate that research study for a different set of samples, right? So what are the chances of your data, the result that you got from this one sample that you initially studied, what are the chances that the same kind of result you'll be seeing for a different sample drawn from the same population? That's the whole purpose of using p-value and significance. So that's just the basic gist of it. I'll just again share the screen uh, to show what the textbook says about it. Right. Okay. Okay. When you say your date your results are statistically significant, it's like that the result of a study would be unlikely if in fact the sample studied represent a population that is no different from the population in general, an outcome of hypothesis testing in which the null hypothesis is rejected. It's just basically paste from the textbook itself. Psychology researchers use a cutoff on the comparison distribution with probability of 5% that a score will be at least that extreme if the null hypothesis were true. That is, researchers reject null hypothesis if the probability of getting a sample score this extreme is less than 5%. This probability is usually written as p less than 0.05. Okay, so how in the research section, in the result and conclusion part of it, any research paper, what you show of what, if you have to give someone the gist that what your research concluded. So you say that whatever data, the result that you got for your own sample that you studied, that data, that result can be replicated to a different sample for a same population with this level of confidence. Like for example, in this comic, the news says that the researchers are 95% confident or 99% confident that Dettol will probably wipe all germs from your hand. That's the whole basic simple way to understand what significance and p-value is. Although the topic for significance and p-value is more suitable when in the later on presentation someone will discuss inferential statistics, my purpose of giving a basic idea of it was to be able to explain it when I'll be discussing now the research papers that was shared on the group. So far, did the difference between differential, descriptive, and inferential statistics clear? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. Was I able to communicate what nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio, scale was? Was it okay with everyone? Mean, median, mode. Isha, you mentioned. Okay. No. If, is there any question so far?
That was for a reply, I guess. There's no
Okay. Okay.
question.
Okay. Yeah. For variance and standard deviation, I know thoda sa I like bit of it was like rushed out and just giving a gist of it because every textbooks do include this kind of a topic. Stats first, second, third chapter probably includes central tendency and variance. My idea was to just explain in terms of psychology and the research paper that we'll be discussing. And the basic idea of why we are using a p significance and p value just for the sake of understanding the research paper. Was it clear? Yes, no, maybe. I'm unable to see if someone has switched on their camera. Okay. What we'll do is I'll probably take a break because I have to drink water now. So meanwhile, you can think upon it. Then we'll discuss a research paper that was shared. So for the discussion part, I'll probably going to take the paper which was about stress, anxiety, depression, and physical illness in college students. That's the paper that we'll be discussing first. So it's already shared on the Slack group. So if you can open and keep it ready with you, I'll take a break for a minute or two, drink water, and then come back. Is it okay?
Yes, please, Tanvi. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, and we will soon begin the paper discussion.